It's now my real pleasure to welcome to the conference Baroness, Beeban, Kidron, OBE. I just said to Beeban a few minutes ago, I won't go into a long introduction because I could talk endlessly about what Beeban has achieved and is doing, but there is just something, Beeban, I'd just like to read, please, which I think sets the scene beautifully, because you are a real champion of what this conference is dedicated to trying to do. And I'll just go back to an interview that you did with the New York Times in August of 2019, when you visited Silicon Valley, apparently camouflaged in the local uniform of jeans and sneakers, and actually took the fight right into the heart of the valley. And I'll just read, it's a direct quote from the New York Times that says, "The problem as Baroness Kidron sees it is that apps like YouTube and Instagram use data-fueled enticements, such as tallying likes and automatically personalizing videos that play one after another to get youngsters hooked on their services. Children, she says, are no match for the turbocharged influence tactics and often stay glued to the services, even if doing so makes them unhappy. The idea that it's okay to nudge kids into endless behaviours just because you are pushing their evolutionary buttons, it's not a fair fight. Lady Kidron told me as she sat a few tables away from a Facebook policy executive, it's little Timmy in his bedroom versus Mark Zuckerberg in his valley." I think that sums up in 2019 all the problems as you saw them then. But what Beeban has then continued to do is to work as a crossbencher in the House of Lords to actually hold government to account in terms of its Online Harms Act, to start looking at the implications of what algorithms are doing and the dangers of algorithms, and now, of course, the threat of artificial intelligence. And we can all see what that is doing to us. So it is my real pleasure to introduce Baroness Beeban Kidron to address conference. Beeban.
Thank you very much. That's like a quick précis of what I'm going to say next. I really am grateful for the invitation to speak to you, and of course, I want to say just at the outset, this is a sort of, declaration of interest. I'm a crossbench peer, which means I'm not politically aligned, and it also means I work with both the government and the opposition, but I don't speak for either of them. And I always do that at the beginning, because then I get quoted and people say that I said it on behalf of. So I say it on behalf of myself and the Five Rights Foundation, which I am proud to chair. So I would, of course, like to start my remarks by thanking everyone in this room for what they do. Working at the front line of this issue is upsetting, and it can knock out one's faith in the rest of humanity. And so I want to thank you for what you do, your teams who are not here, and of course, survivors and survivors' families. What I thought would be most useful this morning was if I talked a little bit about the role of privacy and safety by design in child safety. And I do this because while many of the people in this room have the difficult task of dealing with abuse or perpetrators after the damage is done, I have in my voice something that was said many years ago to me by an enforcement officer. And he said, if I never had a new case, it would take me 3 lifetimes to get through my backlog. And his voice has been with me ever since in all the decisions I make and the fights I choose to fight. It's about what do we do about that reality, as well as the reality of harm. So Indulge me a little, because I'm actually going to start by talking a little bit about childhood, and I hope that that will frame what I then go on to say about privacy and safety by design. Childhood is the word that we use to describe the journey from dependence to autonomy, from infancy to maturity, and whilst very different children's and different personal, social, and economic circumstances impact on that journey, we have, over time, established an understanding of this transition in terms of childhood needs and childhood norms that make up a series of childhood development milestones. So a development milestone is widely understood to be an age, or commonly an age range, by which certain maturities and understandings are likely to be achieved. But importantly, conversely, an age or an age range when certain maturities and understandings are unlikely or not supposed to be in place. So whilst a child at 3 to 5 is beginning to understand how others feel and experience things differently to them, they're not able to critically understand that information, and they will take that information at face value. And it's not until the age of about 13 to 15 that a child will develop a heightened sensitivity to risk. And at that stage, some of them will run towards risk, and some of them will run away from it. But before that age, they will not necessarily understand it or even see it, which has an impact when we think about what we tell children about their online lives. It is our understanding of the physical, neurological, emotional changes that take place during childhood that has shaped society's response to children. And although we take the view that parents and those with parental responsibility offer the first line of care for and defense of children, we have also concluded that children, by virtue of their age and their vulnerabilities associated with that age, require a broader set of privileges and protections. We educate children, we mandate education, we consider pediatric medicine to be distinct and require extra qualification. We don't criminalize very young children, and in the UK at least we impose a public interest test on prosecuting older children. We don't allow adults to hold children to contractual obligations. We put traffic calming measures. We rate films according to development stages. They have special protections in the labor force, and we make it illegal for them to smoke, drink, gamble. And we even take steps to protect them in environments where adults smoke, drink, and gamble. In short, the overriding understanding is that society must, above any other consideration, act in the best interests of a child. This reflects a global consensus that the capacity of a child to understand and act is necessarily limited by the vulnerabilities and immaturities associated with their age, and that they have a set of existing rights under the Convention of the Rights of Children, ratified by all countries but the United States of America. The digital environment, therefore, is almost unique in failing to reflect this global consensus. And it is that failure that lies at the heart of the willful negligence we have allowed to develop over time, which is often referred to as tech exceptionalism. The consequence of the tech sector's failure to recognize and design for children and childhood is very well known in this room. So I'm not going to rehearse all the problems, but spend my time highlighting two ways in which services could be designed to acknowledge the needs and rights of children by design and default. The first area is privacy. Now, I'm aware, more than aware, that the current debate on privacy has traditionally been dominated by one community that sees end-to-end encryption as a cover for predators, and another that says the state having access to private communication is the beginning and end of personal freedom, is the end of personal freedom. And I'm not going to actually rehash that debate, but would like to point more positively to the benefits that flow when children are offered privacy by design and default on the products and services that they are using. High privacy from commercial actors automatically reduces the availability and visibility of children, that keeps their contacts to those they know, that holds at bay the demands deliberately designed into the products and services that they're using. The lack of privacy that companies have traditionally afforded is not an accident or a glitch. It is an intentional design choice. The three holy grails of the tech sector, time spent, engagement, and spread, are all geared to the pursuit of profit in a system labeled the attention economy. And in pursuit of children's attention, they offer few protections. The algorithms that recommend children's account to adult men, because data on the videos the men have been engaging with indicates they prefer videos of tweens dancing whilst dressed in bikini, is a design choice. The unmoderated private messaging function that allows adults to send unsolicited images of their genitals to children is a design choice. The voice call function on gaming platform that allocates children and adult strangers to the same team, then connects them on unmoderated live chats, is a design choice. Prioritizing time, engagement, and spread over privacy has real-world consequences for children. Tech companies that extol the virtues of end-to-end encryption appear implacable when at the same time they harvest children's data to offer personalized services, even when this means serving up children to pedophiles. In 2018, I introduced the Age-Appropriate Design Code as an amendment to the Data Protection Act, and that code articulates children's right to high privacy by design and default. And whilst I think it could do more, it did do three really important things. The first thing was it established the age of adulthood as 18 and not 13, as the tech companies would prefer. It established protection should be design and default, and in doing so, it moved the burden of child protection from the child to the company that was engaging with that child. As well as bringing in a raft of changes for privacy, the AADC connected, in the minds of legislators, privacy and safety. The point is that a company's right to broadcast a child from their bedroom, to give anyone's access to a child's friendship network, or to make a child's real-time location visible to strangers are all examples of where a child's privacy, where one can enhance a child's privacy by restricting a company's access to the data, and in doing so, protect them from harm. I am happy to answer specific questions about changes and provisions in relation to the ADC, but for now, the point I wanted to make about privacy by design is that the AADC has given us just a glimpse of how services would look and behave differently when designed for children's privacy rather than profit. And second, that it shows that companies can make significant changes and the sky does not fall in. Which leads me to the question of safety by design more generally. The Online Safety Act passed last year. Its provisions and supporting codes and guidance have begun to come into effect. And those of you who followed the bill will know that parliamentarians of all kinds were crystal clear that safety by design and the need to provide children with heightened protections were mission critical. In fact, I and other members of the House of Lords successfully campaigned for an amendment to articulate those principles which sit at Section 1 of the Act, the first and introductory section that companies must be safe by design. Now, Ofcom has published its code on illegal harms and safety duties for children, and the very fact that companies hosting user-generated content likely to be accessed by children will be required to know they're dealing with a child is a victory. For 2 decades at least, the tech sector has willfully ignored children, because if you know for sure your customer was under 18, it rather begged the question of why you sent them hardcore porn or a message designed to encourage self-harm. It was easier to simply turn a blind eye. Some suggest that identifying children is the end of the internet as they know and love it, but the vast majority of parents, not only in the UK, but across the connected world, think a know your customer approach should be standard. And similarly popular is preventing children accessing pornography. The sexualization of early childhood and the access to sexual violence undermines the standards we have set in place to protect the development of children and childhood. But while there is much to welcome in the new regime, all of us, inside and outside of Parliament, need to continue to push the dial. There is little in the codes that deals with the needs of early years versus older children, which incentivizes design choices that will be inappropriate for one or other group. It's important that teenagers access information and entertainment that is appropriate to their development stage without making it possible for preteens to have access. It is, I would argue, also important that children do have access to the internet, to digital services, in a way that is suitable for their age, and that the answer is that we don't cut them off from the source. There is a need to ensure that companies enforce their minimum age requirements, which I have not yet seen in that children's code, and prevent underage use of demanding services, the risks of which they cannot see or understand. A child of 10 has not yet reached a development stage in which they can see or understand risk, let alone respond to it. And I believe there is still a gap between identified risks and mitigations, including some particularly high-risk features such as live stream, real-time messaging, or the ability to create large groups of audiences. And I do want to say this, which is I had an interesting conversation yesterday with someone nameless, in which it was said there were no technical measures to meet these problems. And I said, how about switching them off? Many of the things that cause problems to children, many of the things that are unsafe, are features and functionalities that are not necessary to the central function of the service and could just be switched off. That is what I call high privacy by default. That battle is ongoing. I do believe that some of these issues will be resolved by government or Ofcom as we move forward, and I do notice a lot of people here from the UK, and I do ask you to use your networks and your voice to make sure that the legislation that we have brought forward does do what it says on the tin and make children safe. You know we need to hear from you. And for anyone who's interested, my colleagues at Five Rights and also the Online Safety Network will be publishing very detailed policy statements on all of this that you can then look at to save yourselves the 1,300 pages of the Children's Code and the 1,500 pages of the Illegal Arms Code. There will be a very, very good summary by those two organisations. But my point here is whether in the UK or beyond, the requirements of the AADC, the Online Safety Act, the Australia E-Safety Commissioner, the EU's DSA and AI Acts, each one is building a vision of a different world in which we consider risks and needs, the rights and development stages of children before the rollout of products and services, rather than continue with the tech exceptionalism that has both carelessly and willfully caused children harm. It is neither revolutionary nor unreasonable to say that the privacy and safety of children is simply a price of doing business, whether that price is an investment in safety tech or a reduction in profit. It is simply the consensus set out in the Convention that the best interest of children are paramount. And even as we fight the battle of the last 2 decades and Regulation 1.0 is rolling out, we must rush to address the present and future risks of another transformative technology in the form of generative AI. It has already turbocharged the speed at which synthetic content can be created, and its capabilities will only increase at rapid pace. In the fight against child sexual abuse, generative AI has already made it possible for offenders to build and train models to produce bespoke child sexual abuse material at speed and at eye-watering scale. And I say on this particular issue that it is a new frontier, not only because of the speed and scale, but because there is no limit to the imagination of what can be produced. Things that cannot happen in the real world can happen in this environment. I have been working with officers from OSIT who are in the room today, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart for the work that they do and the help that they have given, to create a new criminal offence of producing, possessing, distribution, or advertising files or models intended to create CSAM. And I hope and anticipate that that will be in law soon, and you will hear announcements in the next couple of weeks on that matter. The issues and solutions may differ country to country, but auditing local laws to determine whether they are sufficient to tackle AI is urgent work. And if I can say this here and now loudly, that the laws of AI must be equal or greater than those that cover existing content. This is not a victimless crime, and if we have learned anything from the last 2 decades, it must be to act as problems emerge, not leave them for later when their prevalence and ubiquity drowns all attempts to contain them. I want to finish by stressing the relationship between mainstream culture of tech and the harms to children. Whether it is a norm that a child is always available, so has no time for reflection and rest that is so important for the development of memory and creativity, or the normalization of sexual self-depictions of children, which creates a culture where it's difficult for children to recognize or reject scenarios in which they can be exploited. Or even the norm that everything you do will be judged publicly and immediately, leaving no room for error, subtlety, or growing up. These are the new norms of a tech-mediated childhood that undermine children and impact on their development and flourishing. It is not enough to protect them from harm. We have to work for their flourishing and their development. Otherwise, we will always be looking backwards. We have got into a habit of assuming that how it is how it must be, and I reject that. We need to build a digital world that reflects the global consensus of the right to a safe and secure childhood, even if it means, or maybe especially if it means, rejecting some of these new norms. And we must be unafraid to raise our voice for bolder and more comprehensive government action, braver and more effective regulatory action, and infinitely better and more responsible innovation. So I want to end as I began, by thanking you for your dedication and commitment. If you are to succeed at the end game of protecting children, then we must all be stronger at the beginning by building the digital world children deserve by design and default. Thank you. Thank you.
Beeban, thank you so much. That was so powerful and so compelling. It was just a great keynote. Thank you very much indeed. We've got 6 minutes, and Beeban has said she'll take questions. So do we have any questions? Gentlemen at the front, do we have the mic, please? You can just introduce yourself, please. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Good morning, Andrew Campling. I'm a trustee with the Internet Watch Foundation. Thank you for your sort of really impressive keynote. A two-part question, but it's quite a short one. You talked about design choices. In the field that I work, which is in Internet standards, the tech sector is changing standards by design to, for example, bypass parental controls, which gives plausible deniability to the companies that things will no longer work, so it sort of makes it easier to target children. And also, since you touched on end-to-end encryption, I've had the discussion with the president of Signal that you could easily check whether someone's about to upload or download CSAM before you encrypt it, which doesn't break encryption, and she's disinterested in making that design choice. I'd be interested in your thoughts as to whether those are acceptable choices and what can be done to challenge them. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the first point, I think the question of standards is really interesting because Five Rights Foundation, which I chair and I founded, has been working in the standard space for some years with the IEEE and with Sensenelec and other people, because we saw it as soft law. We saw it as getting ahead of what governments were willing to do. And then a few years ago at a conference, not focused on this issue, but like this, someone from one of the big tech companies said, oh, yes, we think we'll get into standards. You know, we're appointing a standards officer. Who do you know? And I thought, oh, you know, this is the next phase. This is capture. Yeah? So I think the first thing is those of you who actually represents organizations should get interested in standards, in being, they are voluntary systems, and you join the community and you participate in the creation of standards. There is nothing I can do, you know, to stop that capture, because it's inherent that it's a voluntary system. However, I think where we do see good standards, we can get regulators to point at them. And so actually the creation of standards still is important in soft law, because we go ahead, we get the expertise and say, this is what we mean by age assurance. This is what we mean by safety by design in this particular area, and so on. So I do think it's really important. I mean, yes, I agree with you, you know, and their disinterest is what I call, you know, I think it's a willful crime. What can I say? I'm not going to get much argument in this room, but I think that that's where the law comes in. And this has sort of been my sort of position for the last 10 years. We need we need to create standards, we need to change the law, we need to have regulation, we need to enforce that regulation, and we need to advocate publicly and shame and explain. It's a lot of work for a few people, and we're not as well funded as they are. But I do think, and that's why I was pointing to the building, and I'm aware of a lot of regulatory initiatives that have not quite hit the statute yet, but from all over the world. But, you know, it's not just the Online Safety Bill, or the Age Appropriate Design Code, or the EU DSA, it's all of it. And in the end, you know, I was once told by someone who I jokingly call Deep Throat, because they work at one of the companies, and I wouldn't say their name in public, you only have to get it in 2 jurisdictions, and then it becomes the law, because actually we have to just keep raising the floor. So I do understand, and I share frustration, impatience, anger with many people in this room, but we just got to march on, and, you know, and I feel that the critical mass is now with us in a way it certainly wasn't 12 years ago, when I was treated like a middle-aged woman who didn't get the new rock and roll.
So there's another question over there, please, and I'll come to the one online. We all have time.
Yeah, no, it's
Thank
fine.
you.
I mean, I just don't want to eat into the next person's.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Julie Dawson from Yoti. Baroness Kidron, before the Age-Appropriate Design Code or the Online Safety Bill, I remember you worked on a private members' bill around minimum standards for age assurance, and we're still really awaiting what will be deemed to be highly effective in terms of age assurance. And I just wondered, are you seeing glimmers of hope that we will get the degree of clarity and detail, and also that will look at where in the stack that minimum standard or highly effective should be?
Yeah, no, I think, so I have anxiety around that issue. I had a private members bill that would set out the requirements and of how we use age assurance, and to make sure it didn't become just an 18 age gate and kick kids off. So I had two ambitions. One was to make it effective, where it needed to be effective, dating sites, pornography, self-harm, you know, those sorts of things. But I saw age assurance as a positive, that actually if you know someone, you know, your group that you're dealing with is probably between 11 and 13, that you might actually think about the development from that perspective, and you might do age-appropriate things. I think we haven't got there with Ofcom's first offer, if you like, and I think there's a lot to be done about the age appropriateness, but I do think that the standards world is building standards around the highly effective, and I think that that is where we should push for the 18 line, if you like, to try and get some consensus around that. Lots of work in Europe, lots of work in standards, as you know, Julie, but I would ask the room to remember, you know, that if young people, and I do speak to and work with a lot of young people, if young people, they ask for 2 things. They ask first not to be cut off from their friends, yeah? And second, they ask for it to be fair. So fair, to me, includes making sure we're not so concentrated on 18, yeah, that we don't think about what it is to be 7, 12, or 16. And I think that unless we make it fair, A, we're going to sort of, you know, create an idiot generation technology-wise, but B, they're not going to observe the rules. They want rules. They want them to be fair, and they have to be a bit more subtle. So I am working on that, as you would expect, but I don't think we're there yet.
Beeban, thank you so much. I think we could spend the rest of the morning asking you questions and talking about this passionate subject that we are all here to to improve the response to. I think you've really captured the mood this morning in terms of the challenges that we present, the critical role of regulation globally as it moves forward. But I also can't help but think that actually at some point, be it through shaming or whatever it might be, that the big tech companies have got to start adhering to some form of social and moral responsibility, because unless they do, I think despite some of the best regulation that we could ever introduce, we will still be facing an uphill battle. But
I would
thank you
agree
so
with
much for your speech this morning.
Thank you.